Hello and welcome to It's All Academic, the Open Learn podcast here, part of the Open University. And today we've got a really interesting topic. And with the World Cup starting just in a couple of days' time, or possibly even started by the time you hear this, we're going to be talking about life in a bubble. And what we mean by that is, what is it like being part of the squad, being part of the camp that goes to a large tournament away from home for weeks on end with a small group of colleagues? What does it entail? What are the impacts? How do they cope? And what decisions are what thinking goes into the decisions behind who gets to go on these huge camps and to a World Cup? We're going to be talking to the Open University's Dr. Alex Twitchen of the Sports and Exercise Department. So without any further ado, let's invite Alex onto the call and let's find out more about living life in a sporting bubble. Hi, Alex. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Ben.
So, yes, there's an article that you've written that's appearing on the Open Learn website entitled Life in a Bubble. And as we said there in the intro, very much about what it's like being part of a squad that could be away from home for weeks on end at a large tournament. So maybe if you could just give us a little intro into that, tell us a little bit about the article, and then we can dive into some of the nuances of that, ask you a few questions and find out some of the angles that you've covered in the article. But give us a quick sort of overview if you can.
Okay. Well, as with any international tournament, indeed any international sporting competition, the participants, the athletes, but also the support staff, as you say, Ben, are going to be away from home for a significant period of time. If we take this World Cup, given that it's now a 48-team tournament, and it's also for many teams in another part of the world, they could be away from home if they reach the final for up to 8 weeks, living, working together for that period of time. So it is, in a sense, a bit of an artificial kind of environment. It's not like the normal environment. If you look at, say, most professional footballers, when they're playing for their club teams in the league competitions, they'll go in to train each morning, but after lunch, they'll go back home, spend time with their families, partners, etc. And that's the kind of normal daily, weekly routine. A tournament like the World Cup presents a very different challenge to what the players and the staff, the support staff, experience normally during the course of a football season. So it is a bit of a bubble in a way, given the nature of it.
Just to give people a sort of bit of context, I believe your previous role before the Open University, you're actually a football sports coach yourself. So
Yeah.
although you may, I'm assuming you have not gone to a World Cup or perhaps a major sporting event, but I think you've got some experience of actually having teams in camps. Is that correct?
Sort of. So many, many years ago, just after I left university, I worked for a summer in the US on Long Island on a soccer camp for 8 weeks, July and August, and we coached children. We had them there on a residential basis. So it wasn't exactly the World Cup, but you did feel as though you were on that kind of, you were in that camp environment, working closely with about 15, 16 other coaches, sometimes up to 200 children a week. Like I say, residential from Monday through to Saturday lunchtime, through the hot summer months. So yeah, it brings back many fond memories, but equally, it kind of, I can remember some of the challenges that we had.
Well, let's talk about some challenges then, as you just sort of presented me with that word. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, like I say, it's living in close proximity with a group of people that you may or may not know particularly well, or may not even like particularly much. What else is there to take into consideration? What are the challenges of putting a group, like say, not just of 26 players, but managers, coaching staff, physios, all that support staff, a huge group of people away from their regular surroundings, throwing them together for a long period of time? And what immediately jumps out at you of what are those challenges and what needs to be managed well to make it work, to help make a World Cup, a huge event like this, a success for a team, not just on the pitch, but off it?
Yeah. So first of all, the players are going to have quite a lot of downtime. I mean, there's only so much training they can do. In fact, given the nature of the tournament, they're going to play, recover, prepare, play, recover, prepare for the next game. So inevitably, there's going to be a significant amount of time where the players aren't training. They're not engaged in kind of purposeful activity, as it were. So how do you first of all occupy the players' time? It might be slightly different for the support staff. So if you take some of the analysts, for example, they might actually be working quite hard during that time, analysing, coding games, preparing reports, feeding back to the coaches, etc. So you've kind of got this little bit of a disequilibrium between the players who have got quite a bit of time on their hands, and maybe then some of the support staff, as I say, who are working quite intensively at that time. And one of the challenges is, how do you occupy the players? And I think England probably have learnt from some bitter experiences over the years, and they've become quite skilled at managing the camp in that respect. They go to great efforts to make the environment feel like a home away from home. They have kind of little personal messages from the players' family and friends in the rooms, and they equip the hotel or wherever it is they're staying in such a way that it can help the players, entertain the players, give the players something to do, but at the same time, kind of building those relationships between the players in the squad. So they're kind of spending time together. So I think it's one of the key challenges is occupying the time of the players productively when they're not, as I say, going to and playing the games, and when they're not back doing some training and preparing for the games that they're playing in. That for me is one of the key challenges. And also, making sure you get the balance right, so they have some own time for themselves. And I'm sure many of the players are going to bring friends and families over. So how do you manage that time? And I think the families have a bit of a role to play here in terms of their role in supporting their players throughout the tournament.
So it's very much not a case then of a nation finds its base, finds a hotel that, yes, this looks nice, this will work for us, it's comfortable, it's large, it's got training facilities nearby. Is it really a case that teams will find somewhere that is in the right location, but very much they'll adapt that hotel for their own needs? That they will put in what they want to entertain the players, they will adapt the rooms to suit their needs. And so it's not a case of, here's an off-the-peg hotel, this is where we'll stay, we'll make it into what we want.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's been a learning process. And I think it's been a learning process for England, and it's been a learning process for other teams. And other countries will do things slightly differently. They have a kind of maybe a different outlook. Some will want it to be quite a focused, a very disciplined kind of environment. They might not let friends and families come into that environment. Other countries might take a more outgoing, kind of friendly, open kind of environment. So each country, if you went to the World Cup and you went to visit these kind of training camps, these base camps, you might find slightly different approaches to how they're managed, how they're organised as well. And that's one of the things that I find quite fascinating, how each country decides to, as I say, organise the base camps and make sure that the camp is contributing to the performance on the pitch in the best way possible. It's getting the best out of the players, and you're not sort of feeling that the environment that the players and the staff are in is not contributing to what's happening on the pitch. I'm sure there is a relationship between how happy the environment is at the camp, if you like, and what you see in terms of performances on the pitch.
Do you think what is at these camps, at these hotels, is it sort of increasingly player-led in terms of sort of the entertainment, the extracurricular activities
Yeah, I
there,
think
or is
so.
it someone sort of very much dictating? In the England's case, is it Thomas Tuchel says, no, you know what, I like playing snooker, so we'll match as a snooker table? Or is it a case that Harry Kane says, oh, I like darts, so there'll definitely be a darts tournament? I mean, how is it? Are we talking, is it more player-led now perhaps than it used to be?
I suspect it is, and from what I understand, yes, it is. The players have a big voice in the activities they'd like to do. There will be a leadership group, and you can see in England's case, the players that have been selected from the squad, I think some of those players have been selected for their kind of experience and their leadership qualities, as much as their talent. So yeah, I think the players have a very significant input into the kind of environment that they want. And I think the other aspect to this, Ben, is, okay, we're looking at the England senior team now, but a lot of the players in the squad that have been selected will have experienced similar environments when they played for the age group teams, under 19s, under 17s, for example. And having that experience in those age group teams of going away from home, to a overseas tournament and experiencing what it's like to be in that kind of environment is a massively important learning lesson. And it's really preparing them for the kind of expectation as what's involved if they do make it into the senior team. So anyone in the senior England men's or indeed women's team will have had experience of being in this kind of environment before, in an age group team.
Yeah, I think it was a phrase in the article that you've written where I think you refer to sort of Club England, and I think that's a real drive, hasn't it, been over the years to make it feel more like that club environment, to, like say, all coming up through the age groups. And it's probably, I mean, I'm guessing there's probably very few occurrences now where players have made it into a World Cup squad for England in the past few tournaments who haven't been part of a youth setup somewhere along the line. Is that probably fair to say?
I'm struggling to think of a player in the current squad who perhaps hasn't played for England at some point in an age group team. But you're right, that kind of Club England aspect, where people, you've got that identity, that common identity, everyone's pulling in the same direction. And again, that's just contributing to the environment that you want to create. And that's a challenge in its own right, because you can have players coming from clubs where, in the league season, they're rivals and they're playing for rival clubs. And then suddenly you bring them into an environment where they're playing for England. So I think kind of building that English identity is really important. And again, perhaps we've learnt the lessons from the past where an England squad was a bit fractured along club lines. You had a group of players from one club, a group of players from another club, and maybe they didn't see eye to eye, and managing that for the head coach, the manager, can be probably, I can imagine, quite problematic. So again, and this again is the value of supporting and investing in age group teams, that you kind of break down those club rivalries, and you get England, and you get the players and the staff thinking about being and representing England and Scotland, of course.
Yes, yeah. On the player front, just interested in your take on, again, a bit sort of taking the England example. When the squad was announced, it was sort of not particularly veiled reference to not necessarily the best players being picked. Obviously, there being a few personalities, might be the polite word perhaps to use, that weren't included. I mean, how important is that, and how much does that come into the thinking, do you think, around having a squad? I think there's a few famous examples, like I think Connor Cody, we've previously spoken about when we were talking about doing this podcast. His name came up as that, a good bloke to have around, a good member of the squad who almost certainly was not going to play when he went to the World Cup, but no one minded him being there. Everyone understood the value of an experienced and likable person. Give us your thoughts on the players maybe who didn't make it in, and sort of the personality, the problems around those personalities, and the value of having someone that everybody does like around.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to this. There's one which is from a kind of a technical performance aspect, and that is you're looking for a squad of players who have got a range of attributes and different attributes. And at any one moment in time, some of the attributes of some of the players might be vital in a particular game situation. So you don't really want a squad of players who are very similar to each other, because if you want to change a game, then you need people that can come onto the pitch and offer you something different. If you want to change the way you play because of what the opposition do, then again, you might decide you want someone different who's got different, as I say, attributes that can influence that. So getting the balance of the squad and how that relates to the potential balance of the starting 11, and then how you might change that during the game according to how the game is going, is really important. And I can see Thomas Tuchel's thinking there, that a player like Ivan Toney, for example, you can imagine with his kind of attributes, his kind of skill sets, in a certain situation, he might prove very valuable. And so it's worthwhile having him in the squad for potentially what could be those moments. And then I think there's the second question, that you are then thinking, right, how will this group of players work together and support each other? How do they trust each other? And that's another sort of vital kind of psychological element in terms of the team dynamics. So putting a squad together takes a lot of thinking and a lot of thought. I mean, fortunately in England, you've got quite a range of choice, shall we say. We're very fortunate with the level of talent that we have, and I'm sure it must have been very tricky and very challenging to decide on the players that were going on the plane. And there were some tough decisions that had to be made, but I can see the logic of the thinking, both from a playing point of view and kind of being, as I say, in this kind of environment for hopefully up to 7 or 8 weeks. And I think there's some interesting lessons there for every coach. You know, your best team is not necessarily made up of the best technical 11 players. I know, you know, as a coach myself, I'm always thinking about, have I got the right balance and the right relationship between the players on the pitch at any one moment in time? And sometimes that means not having the best technically gifted players on the pitch. It's just looking at each player and their attributes and how they complement the attributes of other players. And like I say, that can change through the course of a game. If you're 1-0 down with 5 minutes to go, have you got someone on there who can come on and just give you something extra, something different, which might create a chance, which could change the game?
I mean, it's sort of interested in that idea, as well as you mentioned about sort of the, you know, we're talking 7-8 weeks from the squads first getting together if they go all the way through. And you said about that sort of pattern of sort of play, recover, the, you know, being more teams, more games this time. But what about sort of the longer term fatigue? Because obviously the players might get more physically tired as the tournament goes on. I'm guessing the first couple of weeks are always a little bit easier. It's exciting, it's fun, or it's interesting, or we're moving to a new hotel, a new stadium, a different game. 3-4 weeks in, it's starting to get tiring. Some of the players perhaps haven't featured as much as they would like to. People are starting to grate on each other. So about that side of things, the sort of the mental fatigue, and how can that sort of show itself in different ways? What are the challenges there that you see?
Well, I think mental fatigue, you know, there's been a little bit of research to demonstrate that mental fatigue is a significant factor, particularly on longish camps in overseas countries. And again, I think it comes back to a whole range of different techniques about how you keep players motivated, how you keep them involved, how you kind of try to avoid perhaps the fatigue that comes from just boredom, or as you say, Ben, someone who's not playing, but they still got a vital role, because it might be that for a practice session, you want to play 11v11, and actually you might not be in the starting 11, you might not even get on the pitch, but your contribution can be in supporting the starting 11 in terms of the practicing and the preparation for a game. So as a manager, I would be thinking, as a head coach, I would be thinking, every single one of you has got a contribution that you can make at some point in time, and that contribution could be vital. Doesn't matter if you're starting, if you don't get on the pitch, you can still make a vital, important contribution to the overall performance of the pitch. And I think keeping players' minds focused in that way, in terms of what their role is and why they're there and how they can contribute, helps to alleviate potentially some of the mental fatigue that does come from being away from home. And it's then kind of linking that into the downtime that they have, the time they spend with their families and so forth. And we're not just talking about the players, we're talking about the support staff as well, because the support staff is, I don't know the exact number, but it could be as big as the playing staff as well. So you've got to think about that group of people and where do they get their downtime, and how do they know that they're making a positive contribution to the performance. So yeah, it's a really, I think, challenging role, and it's something very different to club football, where, like I say, you know, you go into the club's training ground, you practice on the morning, you might all have lunch together, and then the players go home. And that's kind of repeat and rinse, you know, or rinse and repeat every day. And I think, you know, Tuchel himself is not, maybe this is his first major tournament. So I think it will be a great learning curve for him in terms of how different it is to being a manager in a club team, even though he's of course managed teams like Chelsea and Bayern Munich and PSG, where you're very much in the spotlight day in, day out. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating for all sorts of reasons.
As you've mentioned him, let's talk about another sort of key word, I think, which is leadership. And it's not obviously just one. Yes, there's a manager, but I'm sure within the group of players there are, you know, we generally hear more now about sort of leadership groups. how important is that? I mean, and how important to have some leaders that can sort of set a tone, and for the right or wrong reasons, I guess it's not always a positive tone that these leaders set. So tell me a little. Let's talk a little about leadership and the importance of that within this context.
I think you're right, and I think that's one of the underlying reasons why you've got the likes of John Stones and Jordan Henderson there. You know, you've got Harry Kane as well. So I think he's probably settled on his leadership group, and those players probably know what their role is there. John Stones maybe might not start, I don't know, but you know, he's still going to be there using his experience and you know, the successes he's had at Manchester City and knowing what it takes to win competitions and to, you know, like win a tournament like this. All of that's going to be really vital. And I think again, in a leadership group, you're probably looking for a range of different characteristics and slightly different personalities. So you might want someone who commands the respect of the players because of what they've achieved. You might want someone who has the respect of the players because of maybe the way they play. Someone again might have the respect of the players because of you know, who they are as a person. So when you select a leadership group, I think you're looking for a group of people who are leaders in their own right, but maybe offer different aspects of leadership. So they complement each other, and they really, you know, set the tone, set the kind of atmosphere for the camp. And if things aren't going well on the pitch, if England struggle in, say, the opening 2 games, that inevitably then has an impact on the camp. You know, it kind of gets a bit gloomy and the mood kind of goes down. And that's when you're looking for some of those players to kind of raise the spirits of the squad and the support staff and what have you. So it comes back to what I said earlier. Everybody, whoever they are, players and support staff, have got a role to play and can some way contribute, hopefully, to a potential successful outcome. Nobody's there to kind of just make up the numbers. You know, no one in the playing squad is there to make up the numbers. At any point in time, they've got to be ready to come onto the pitch, and can they contribute something when they come on? You know, have they got that job? Do they know what that job is for them?
I want to come back to a couple of themes that we've sort of mentioned, and I think the sort of you said there about sort of the atmosphere, maybe attitude and atmosphere, but also you mentioned about families earlier on, and the fact that maybe families can come out, that's built into the plan that they will come for visits and so on. But I want to go back, and there may be some people listen to this who are too young to remember I think it was the 2006 World Cup and England's camp in Baden-Baden in Germany, which I'm sure people who do remember it will suddenly recognise that name. Can you tell us a little about that? 'Cause I think that's a sort of a fascinating story where things probably outside of the immediate group, outside of the playing staff and team, sort of took the headlines. So I know that's mentioned in the article, but tell us a little about England in Baden-Baden as an example where maybe it hasn't worked quite so well.
Yeah, well, it became more of a circus, didn't it? You know, the pictures from Baden-Baden were more likely to appear on the celebrity pages of the newspapers rather than the performances on the team, which admittedly weren't great, appearing on the back pages of the papers. And it didn't help that some of the players like Beckham and Rooney and Ashley Cole had high-profile wives and partners as well, who inevitably were going to attract some attention. And it just became notorious for, you know, some of the wives and girlfriends, partners and families going off into the restaurants and the nightclubs and spending fortunes on bottles of champagne and being photographed falling out of nightclubs in the early hours of the morning. And it just doesn't help what the purpose of being there is for the players, if you see what I mean. It just kind of casts a shadow over what for the players is a job of work. And I think, you know, the lesson to be learned from that is that, as I said earlier, the families and the friends, the wives and the partners and girlfriends, they have a role to play in this in terms of, you know, their responsibilities and their understanding about this isn't a holiday. You're there in a high performance environment aiming to achieve arguably the most important tournament in world football. And you can play your part in terms of supporting your sons, your husbands on the pitch. So I think a lot of time will be spent supporting the families and the friends and the wives and the girlfriends and educating them about how they can contribute themselves to this process.
So definitely lessons learned in the last in the
I
last
think
20
so.
years then.
The last 20 years, maybe Baden-Baden was the kind of low point, shall we say, and there's been a lot of lessons learned since then in successive tournaments, but also I think more widely, as I said earlier, when the age group teams go away to tournaments as well. Some good lessons learned there, which the senior team can learn from.
And there always seems to be one nation that that implodes is always the word used. That seems to be infighting in the camp. That is, like say, factions from different rival teams that don't get on with each other, or from different leagues, or players on huge pay discrepancies. Where there's a couple of superstars in the squad. The Dutch and the French seem to be nations that always come up on this. Anything that you're sort of foreseeing this year? Are there any nations where there may be some issues that we could look out for?
I don't know. Maybe it'll be a surprise which kind of nation implodes. Who knows? But yeah, like what you said, and again, that for me is a significant part in how you construct your squad. Anticipating the likelihood of some fractious relationships, particularly if things don't go well. And how you're going to manage those. And I think some people kind of take the view, well, let's just get the 11 best players on the pitch. And if anything kind of like happens, we'll manage it there and then. And others, and I think Tuchel's been a bit like this, let's kind of manage it from the outset and kind of try and anticipate what might happen if X player's not playing or things don't go well and this person blames this person or this person blames that person. So again, it varies from nation to nation how they do this, but like you say, maybe some nations in the past have shown a bit of a tendency to have some intra squad difficulties, but also I'd say despite those, shall we say, intra squad difficulties, they've gone on to win the tournament, and that just highlights that sometimes maybe in a high performance elite team you need a little bit of an edge to get the best out of the players. A high performance environment is not necessarily just all fluffy and comfortable, and because that's that maybe isn't quite the environment that you're aiming for. You want players to have that kind of that edge, if you like, that you're here to win a really tough competitive tournament, and that's what the focus has got to be. And at times that's not going to be easy. There will be some challenges, there possibly will be some setbacks, and that's when the strength of the culture and the identity of the squad and the team really, I think, starts to show.
Excellent. Well, that's a really nice note, I think, to sort of wrap up some of those themes that we talked about in the article. But before you go, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you for a couple of predictions. So obviously one of them, you know exactly what's going to be coming. So I'll let you mull that one over in your mind as to who we should be looking out for, who might win. But what I want to know from you is, in the past, the squads have quite often they've had a bit of fun. They've maybe come up with their own games. They've invented their own tournaments, and we've had so and so being the darts champion. And I think it was back in Euro '96 that the England team had fun in their media interviews trying to sneak in the titles of pop songs. I think it might have been Wham and George Michael songs back in the day. So my question for you, the prediction from this year is, what is going to be the surprise thing that the tabloids are maybe talking about that swept through maybe the English or the Scottish squads? Is there a game, a pastime, or something that you think this could be the surprise hit of World Cup 2026 that we're all talking about?
I can imagine probably in the past it would have been darts or snooker or pool, but now it's probably who's got the best score on, I don't know, a video game of some sort. FIFA maybe. And the one quote that I always remember because it really makes me chuckle was the Italian player before the final, is it in 2012, played the final on FIFA in the morning on the computer and then won the actual final in the evening. I can't remember who it was. I should never remember who it was, but it's a slip of the tip of my tongue at this moment in time. That one made me chuckle. You play it on the computer in the morning and then you go and play the real thing in the evening.
Yeah, it's all about sort of making it happen. That visualizing it and bringing it to reality. I see. My guess on that is going to be Traitors. I thought that sounds like the sort of thing that could be hosted packed away in a hotel with a sort of captive audience. So that's my tip on that one. Um, and go on, end us with the perhaps a player from the England and Scotland squads, not necessarily the star of the tournament, but are there any names in there talking about the things that we've talked about, sort of that leadership, the mental fatigue, the strength, to sort of get through a long period of the tournament? Any players there that you think we should be looking out for as leaders in these two squads, perhaps, rather than the outstanding player who's going to help the rest of their squad through this from a leadership and an influence point of view?
So for England, I'll go for Declan Rice. I think it's going to be really interesting, given the season that he's had with Arsenal, and some of the other Arsenal players are in the squad as well. Saka, Eze, long season, the disappointment of losing the Champions League final at the end of it. But I think the role that Declan Rice has for the England team there is, every role is important, but maybe one or two roles are slightly more important than other roles. And I think he's got a vital role to play, and not just technically and tactically, but in terms of his personality and his leadership skills in there. So yeah, for me, he's an influential player.
And obviously, then the last question is going to be a three-parter. We've talked about England and Scotland. So, how are England and Scotland going to do, in your opinion? And who's going to win it? If it's not one of those two, who's going to win it?
Well, I think you'd already expect England to go quite a long way in the tournament. What does going a long way in the tournament mean? I would say probably beyond the quarterfinal is going a long way. For Scotland, my expectation is they get out of the group stage. I think they then got a good chance to go through into the last 16. And I think if they can do that, get through this new round of 32, that will be a tournament or an outcome which might not be happy with, because they want to go all the way, but I think they would be satisfied with getting into the last 16. And I think they're quite capable of being able to do that.
And the tournament winner, then, if you haven't said England or Scotland are going to win it, so give us some.
I think Argentina are still strong. They've still got the backbone of the team and the squad that won it last time round. I think the Dutch as well. Again, they've still got that kind of strong backbone of the team, a little bit more experience now, and the perennial kind of teams that will be there, like Germany. But my wild card, and they're a team that I really like watching, and people from this country, from England, will probably recognise many of the players in this team, because there's quite a few of them that are playing in the Premier League or have played in the Premier League, and that's Senegal. I thought they were brilliant in the African Nations Cup. Obviously, there's unfortunate controversy in the final against Morocco, but they play this real kind of free-flowing, attacking football, which is just very difficult, I think, to defend against. And in the conditions that are going to be experienced in Mexico, the US, and to some extent Canada. And I'd like to see an African country build on the success that Morocco had and go deep into the tournament. So Senegal, Morocco there as well. And great to see 10 African nations competing at a World Cup.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that. And so there you go. Argentina, the Netherlands, Senegal, maybe Morocco. That's where Alex's interest is. And we really hope you've enjoyed listening to this conversation today, talking, like I say, more about what's happening off the pitch than on it. So enjoy this 2026 World Cup. Maybe keep an extra special eye on this one, on what is happening away from the pitch. Keep an eye on those training camps and the footage and what's happening in the media, and see where the influences are. Did the managers pick the right squads? Did they bring the right players in? Are they showing the leadership? Are we seeing those signs of mental fatigue? Lots of really interesting stuff to keep an eye out for. If you've enjoyed this, then please do give us a follow here on It's All Academic. And we'd love to have your thoughts as well. Pop some comments below. Let us know what your thoughts are. Have you got any examples of squads that previously have imploded? I think was the word that we used. Is there anything that you would like to see us talk about? Or even if you just want to share who you think is going to win the tournament, then pop it in the chat. Myself and Alex, I'm sure we'll keep an eye on things and comment if we can. If you've got any other questions that crop up, please do pop them in there. So give us a follow, give us a like, subscribe on the YouTube channel. And yeah, hopefully You see us again soon for more on It's All Academic. And I will sign off by saying thank you very much for your time, Alex, and enjoy the World Cup. Thanks again and join us soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this clip, feel free to follow the links on screen for more interesting articles and free courses from the Open University.